Picking the right colors is a huge thing in heraldry. Back in the days when the first heraldic achievements were used, they were used to distinguish knights on the battlefield. So they had to have designs that were striking out, visible from a vast distance, because it was just important to know who's your friend or your foe, who would kill you and who would not. So therefore, the rules of Tincture make sure that every design is clearly distinguishable from another. I will guide you through the very basics of these rules of Tincture. You don't have to follow these rules strictly when you're building a fantasy world. Many users of CoaMaker are building fantasy worlds, are using the coats of arms in fantastic settings. So then you would think it doesn't matter much which colors to choose, but I will show you why it does matter. In traditional heraldry, we have two groups of tinctures, two groups of colors. We have the metals and we have the colors. The metals are ore, which is gold or yellow, Argent, which is silver or white. We have Azure, which is blue, Gules, which is red, Purpure, which is purple. We have Sable, black, and Vert for green. Rules of Tincture is now all about combining these colors. And the idea is that you can only put metals on top of colors and colors on top of metals. You can't put a metal on a metal, and you can't put a color on top of a color. Let me give you some examples. All the charges that you find in our library are colored in a proper way, which means in natural color. You can do that in heraldry, but you shouldn't, because it is much more difficult to distinguish. I chose the proper way to coloring the items so that you can find them more easily in the library, because when you search for a bear, you would search for something brown, for example, but it's not consistent. So the eagles, for example, are all blue. Anyway, brown is not a very good color in heraldry, so we just recolor it to ore, to gold. And now we put it on top of the blue shield, because we know we have to put a metal onto a color. We could do this the other way around as well. So we can take, let's say, this dolphin, and we make it all azure, and then we put it onto a metal shield. So let's go here with the Argent shield. So here we follow the rules of Tincture as well. So we have a color on top of a metal. We can continue like that. Let's take a hand here. So this hand is colored proper because it has skin color. And we put it here on this metal. We could use it like this. I mean, having it proper is always a shortcut of kind of breaking the stricter rules of Tincture, but you already see that it's hard to distinguish. So now imagine you are on the battlefield and try to see from afar, okay, what is there on this red shield? Is it really a hand, or what is that? Difficult to say. But when we change this one to Argent, it pops out and it's clear, oh, this is the white hand on red, this is my enemy or my friend. So then it is clear. We can continue a bit here. Let's take the beehive and we recolor it so that it is visible on the ore shield. Let's make it purpure. It pops out. Rules of Tincture are all good. Maybe we do just a last one here, a rose. Let's take this one. You see the rose is proper now with the red and the green and the gold here. It can look nice. So when we have it in a design like this, it's clearly distinguishable. But when we are here on a color, it's tough to see. So here I would make it a metal, and it's all or now, and it sticks much better. So much easier to recognize in this way. So then let's see what is not possible when we go for, let's make it, take the rose again, and we make it blue. Let's see what happens. It is very tough to see, very tough. So nearly undistinguishable from each other. We have, when it comes to ore and argent, to gold and silver, we have an exception. So there are very few circumstances in the real world that allow to use gold on silver and the other way around. So, and this is, for example, the Vatican City or the Pope, because he was the highest sacral authority in the medieval ages and still is in the Catholic world. So, and he is allowed to use gold on silver or the other way around. Similar thing with the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which had a golden cross on its silver shield. There are very few other exceptions where you see this one, but for private use in the real world, probably not possible. But when you build fantasy worlds, you are fine to use that. Let's add the same bear as well, but make it proper now. And we put it on red. You see contrast is much, much lower. So it's much more difficult to recognize and to remember. So this one pops out, the other one does not. And the same here when we go for the blue shield in the background. So you see how it's working. I will just quickly finish this one. Let's make it here. And we have a bit of darker skin. It's much more difficult to recognize in this situation. And let's make here a silver dolphin here, which would be allowed for like highest authorities in real world, for the Pope. But it might be tough to recognize anyway. Now we have a bonus here for all of you who build their own fantasy worlds or who are in fantasy sections. So because in fantasy you can do whatever you want, but I would suggest to do it in limits. So of course you can do everything that is up here. So no problem with that. It's easy to see. You can do this as well, but I wouldn't recommend to do it. But what you can do is to do color combinations that are not possible in the real world, but they are possible in yours. So for example, often the mix of combination of red and black is popular in fantasy settings. So let's take here the polar bear. It is now argent on Gules, but you can imagine making it sables, so making it black. You see, it's not as easy to recognize, but it is possible. It is possible to do it this way. In a fantasy setting, you can still see clearly what is going on here, so it is a bear. The other way around, same thing. Let's take here the viper in red, put it onto a black shield, completely fine. It's easy to recognize. As I said, not a real world design, not a good combination in real world, probably not even possible, but for a fantasy setting, fine. It's easy to recognize. What you can do in fantasy settings as well is to come up with your own colors. In real world heraldry, you can only have one shade of a color. So what would not be possible in real world is to take the bear hat here, for example, make it blue, but a bright blue. So it is possible to recognize. It could be fun in a fantasy setting, because maybe you have a magical material, a different kind of metal. So this could be like, I don't know, moon silver or stuff like that. It is easy to recognize. In real world, not possible, but in your fantasy setting, it could really make your own heraldic rules pop out, so that the heraldic designs mirror your world in a much better way. So this is possible in fantasy. The other way around is possible as well. So when we have here a lighter version of Purpure, and on top we put a purple beehive, it is easy to see, easy to recognize. It is fine. So feel free to experiment with all the color options that CoaMaker offers you. Just make sure that it is easy to see what is on the shield, because that is the fundamental thing of heraldry, to easily recognize who is there. Who is this knight on the battlefield? So which family owns this castle? Which country has this army, etc., etc. So it is all about making symbols distinguishable and easy to recognize. Experiment with colors for real-world designs or for fantasy designs as you like. Have fun.